Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Saints Unscripted. Today we have Christopher, either one.
Depends if I'm in trouble.
We got Chris here with us, and honestly, I'm not even quite sure the best way to introduce you because you have done so much and you've been all over the place. You have been literally all over the world sharing this story, haven't you? Can you give us a little background about just about yourself and kind of a prelude to this story so we can get to know you a little bit?
Sure, yeah. I'm just kind of a regular dad, right? And an entrepreneur, try to do things. I've always tried to build things that build people, but I have a family. I've got 4 kids and a beautiful wife. And I had a boy that was my third son. His name's Mitchell. And, I'm just going about my life trying to do good work in life and, leave an impact on people for good. And my third son, Mitchell, was born. And the minute he was born, I sensed something was immediately wrong with him, but I didn't know what it was. And so for about 3 years, I had this pressing feeling that something was wrong. And I remember I would tell my father-in-law and some other people that were really close to me that I felt like Mitchell would have a short life. And
did he show any signs of like physical abnormalities?
Zero.
Yeah, nothing.
None. He looked
Just
totally
an impression
healthy.
you had.
Yeah, really strong and pervasive press against me. And so at the age of 3, my sister-in-law, my wife's sister, had detected some tiny little breadcrumbs that to normal people would never notice or recognize that. And she says, you should come in and get them looked at. So my wife calls me from Shriners Hospital and says, you need to come in. And I thought, well, can you just
Right.
do I need to run to Walgreens and grab something?
Yeah.
Or,
If he's got a cold or something, it's no big deal.
Yeah, and she's like, no, come in. You need to be here. This is a disease, not an illness. Mm-hmm. So I rush over there to the hospital, and I had this feeling I needed to bring a little recorder. So I ran over to I don't remember what, the Office Max or something, grabbed a little digital recorder, and sat down with the neurologist, and she said, your son has Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And we're like, what's that?
Yeah. How do you even pronounce that?
Totally. And I mean, I'd heard the word before, but I mean, unless it impacts you directly, there's a billion diseases out there. How would you know everything? And she began to describe what it was, and that Mitch would have basically a shortened life, that it was 100% fatal. And I remember just being in a state of total grief, and I had to have her tell me what it meant 3 times. Okay, can you say this all over again?
Right.
And it was a state of shock for us. So, our son then was, at the age of 3, diagnosed, and we just had to figure out how to make moments matter between then and whenever.
Did they give you any kind of timeline? Or
No, in fact, at the time I felt like, the internet was still somewhat immature in terms of where do I go find information and what to cope with. So I'd get onto bookstores and buy books that were written in the 70s trying to figure out what to do, and they weren't very helpful.
So you probably didn't really want to know everything, or
I did.
Yeah.
I mean, I wanted to dive deep and understand it and face that hardship head on. And my wife, I understand. She's like, I don't want to know yet. Just let me
enjoy the moment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we actually made a deliberate attempt to just sort of set that diagnosis on the table for a bit because he was healthy, and just tried to live and process our grief through just making great memories.
Yeah.
That's so hard when you can't tell anything's wrong, but that there's this underlying thing that's going to ravage your lives.
Totally. And what was hard too, somewhat isolating, is knowing that feeling and trying to communicate that, and everyone would be like, you're just being, skittish about life. And I'm like, no, this is a thing. And sometimes you get those feelings and you just have to trust your instincts.
Well, and then you don't want to, and then the worst part is to come and find out you're right, and then it's like, you wish you weren't. I'm sure.
Yeah, but in a way too, I was so grateful to have that confirmation. Even though it was super hard, I was like, he let me know. Yeah. And if he would guide me there to that point, I knew he'd be with me into the future.
That's cool. No, yeah, that makes sense. So how did he take it? How did your son take it?
Well, at the age of 3,
Yeah,
he's just like, "Where's my toys?"
Oh, that's a
And
good point,
chicken
yeah.
nuggets, right?
Yep.
So, in fact, so as he got a little older, he became a little more different, a little weaker than other kids, and so we would start to let him know, "Hey, you're different. Your muscles aren't as strong," and so he kind of grew into an awareness of what it was.
Right, that makes
But-
sense. So what did you guys do to make those memories from the get-go, I guess?
Just tried to live a regular, ordinary, but intentional life.
Yeah.
So when we had dinner, family night, or whatever, we would just try to be there the best we could, and that. So.
Was there a point at which your son realized that the end was inevitably coming for him?
Well, yeah. So fast forward several years. Basically, at the age of 9, just before he was 9, we learned that he had cardiomyopathy. We went in to get a test because the heart's a muscle
Right.
too, and it's usually one of the last muscles to go. But in his case, it started to get affected much earlier. So just before he turned 9, we had this awareness now that his heart was in trouble, and we started taking some serious medication to try to stem the tide or slow down the inevitable. And it didn't work. Like nothing worked. Every medicine we took that would have and should have taken care of it or slowed it down didn't. So his heart function was just falling like a rock off a cliff. Then in October, we went in to go get a test, and then again in November, and we realized that nothing at all was working. They were saying, and he got denied for a heart transplant because he had a pre-existing condition. And so, it wasn't until January of 2013 that he had an MRI. We realized his heart was right on the edge of no longer working. It was at 5% ejection fraction, which means, it's big time trouble.
Yeah.
And so what we've seen is you have your website where you talk about his journey, right? When did you start? Because you've done video, right? Kind of like vlog style.
Yeah.
When did you start doing all of that?
Great question. So right as I discovered his heart was in trouble, I'm like, well, I don't want to email people that don't care, but if they care to go visit, they could see it. And this was just for my close-knit family.
Yeah.
And so it was right after we figured out he had cardiomyopathy. In the year, his 10th year,
Gotcha.
was when I started doing it a little bit. And it wasn't until we started going into the crucible of heart failure that I started to feel the weight of what was going on. And then I started getting a lot more earnest in sharing thoughts.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you notice any, once you started doing that website, did you notice any outreach, at least with your family, or people being more involved, or was it kind of more just a personal outlet for you?
It was kind of a personal outlet,
Yeah.
but then people would start coming in to see that I didn't know, and I started to get worried. I'm like, wait, this is sort of my private space. What are you doing here?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, social media, hello. So
Right. Definitely an opportunity to share.
yeah, and I just let go. I just said, I'm just going to share my heart and my faith and let it be.
Yeah.
People all over the world have been following this. What was there a moment that kind of exploded, or you realized this is really helping a lot of people in the world?
When he was admitted to the cardiac intensive care unit for end-stage heart failure, and I started to post a little bit of that, and they said, hey, you have about couple days with your son. They felt like he was right on the edge. And that's when everyone just started piling in. And in a way, it was weird because when I would post, I wasn't trying to play to anybody. I was just sharing my sorrow and trying to make sense of it. And I think that was it. It wasn't just sharing sorrow, but it was trying to make sense of suffering, because I think that's what everybody in life really wants to do. We're trying to make meaning of our life. And if we can't do it ourselves, or we need the help of other people's insights or their perspectives, I think that's where people lean in.
Right. And well, I guess leading off of that and questions of your faith and your family's faith, how did that play? I mean, I know it played a part, but how did that affect your guys' processing that? And did it help it grow? Did it hurt it? I guess.
Didn't hurt it. But it's one thing to talk from the pulpit about our faith, but it's quite another. Boyd K. Packer said, faith to be faith, you must, take a few steps into the darkness. And that's what we had to do. And so, but we found on retrospect, and even in some sacred moments, that, we weren't alone, and our faith was strengthened, our family was strengthened through it all.
Right. I'm sure the plan of salvation and all of that just makes it a lot more possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're at the hospital. We learned we have a few days with him. Our cardiologist said, run home. If I were you, I would get out of here as fast as you can, and just love that little boy as quickly and as much as you can. And so we I asked the doctors, I'm like, everyone else that was there, is there anything you're doing here that I can't do at home? And they said, no, you can do this at home. And I said, we're out. Like, check us out. So that night we were heading home. You know, it was really cute. Mitchell said, Mom, isn't it my turn to teach family night? And that was what was on his mind. But even in that moment, he didn't know he was about to die. We didn't. He knew it,
Right.
but he didn't know that that was it.
Right.
So, we were pretty touched by that. We were blessed to have about 3.5 weeks with him at home. You know.
Oh, that's
and
awesome. A lot longer than what they had thought.
Yeah, which was sort of a weird, paradoxical, beautiful agony.
Yeah.
And
It's
so,
like, I mean, this is probably a terrible example, but just like this horrible thing is going to happen, but I'm enjoying this time so much. But at the same time, there's still that underlying thing, like what you said, like a kind of a joyous agony throughout that time. And the apprehension must have been killer and just so painful.
well, living in the paradox of beauty and agony, you know, or faith and wonder, you know, there's a justice where it can be so beautiful if we just accept where we are and just make the most of what we have. So Mitchell had a feeling, before we ended up telling him, he said, Mom, can I have an early birthday? My birthday feels so far away. And so she immediately got a birthday party set up for him the next day, and all of his best friends came over. And it was just a really tender time.
Yeah.
And then things started to decline after that, and it was interesting. So the night Mitchell passed, we were in his room, and you know, he at that time his heart had, you know, it was barely pumping, and he could squeeze our hands. And I remember his little dog Marley would crawl under his hand. It was just a tiny little puppy. Like those puppies don't have sensibility; they just want to play. But it's like she knew, and she just put her hand right under his hand. And I've got pictures. I'm going to post them soon where he was just do this to her little body.
'Cause that's all he could do.
That's all he could do. Yeah. And I mean, so that night, Natalie and I were sleeping next to him. And I remember we were on the floor, and Natalie wakes me up and says, before that, I had this feeling. I had already kind of fallen asleep. And I had this feeling, I got shook awake. And it said, tuck Mitch in. And that was his favorite thing. He always would call me and he'd tuck me in. And I came up to Mitch and I just kissed him on the forehead and I said, I love you. I'm so proud of you. And, you know, don't be afraid. You know, we're okay. And I kind of gave him permission to go. And it's, and then I went to bed. And then about 30 minutes later, Natalie wakes up and she's like, Chris. And it was like 1,000 suns exploded. And I woke up immediately and she said, he's gone. And you know, I would feel his body and we knew he was gone. And that was really hard. And I wrote an essay called Nightfall on my blog. And it was about that night where everything was pitch black, spiritually and otherwise. And it wasn't until I allowed my spiritual eyes to adjust to that darkness that as I looked heavenward metaphorically, I started to see the stars. And the stars were little points of light, little tiny things that were always there, but I didn't have the eyes to see them. Those points of light are metaphors for tender mercies, little things that I started to look and connect the dots, and I'm like, wow, you know, these are like constellations, and Heavenly Father's been here the whole way through my son's journey. And I knew that if I could recognize what is done in the past, that Heavenly Father would be there for me in the future.
Yeah.
So,
as he always had been.
As he always had been.
Little points of light, like warning you years before, or having, you know, more than 2 extra weeks with him at the end.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's great. Yeah. Well, and so I think what's really cool about your story, and this is like something you can get a bigger idea from his website, is like one of the most important things when you face any kind of trial, it's like, do you let it make you or break you? Mm-hmm. You know, like do you stay down or do you get back up? And that's what's so cool about your personal story, you know, with your son, with your family, is that you not only did you pick yourself up, but you've done a lot of good with what your son, you know, gave you. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how your journey started from there and sharing his story and starting making a difference.
Okay. Well, and can I just make a quick comment about breaking? I think that some things can absolutely shatter us. And I think losing my son broke me into a million pieces. Yeah. But I think it's what we do with those broken pieces. And so I tried to scoop those up and make a new mosaic of me based on all those little broken parts. And I think we're always changing by our life experiences. We put those pieces together. We become something more beautiful if we, especially if we take heaven's hand in it. So since then, I continued to write stories. In fact, I started writing stories more earnestly after Mitch passed because that was my therapy.
Right.
And if it helped other people, that was great. But it was more about me making sense of that. So we started a foundation called Mitchell's Journey Foundation, and its function is to basically help people in moments of deep grief and trouble and times of trouble. How do I make sense of this? And so we have, workshops and materials to help families process their struggle. We try to help other families with DMD, the same disease my son had, and create awareness of that horrible disease as well. And, my wife and I are always out trying to find other ways to help families make memories because we realize how finite time is. So one of the things we did recently was we created a game based on a tradition I did with my kids where I'd play soundtracks in the background and I'd make up stories at bedtime, or I'd tell them stories in the car or camping. Mm-hmm. And so we turned it into kind of a game that'll help families create memories around the kitchen table.
That's cute.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's fun. And so that's been, because how long ago was it that your son passed away?
About 6 years ago.
And so Dave's saying that you've traveled all over the place. Mm-hmm. Give us an extent, like how far is all over the place, I guess.
Well, our latest was in Ireland.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was fun, and just a beautiful group of people. We love the people of Ireland, and just good sweethearts. One of the mothers we were spending time with has 3 boys with the same disease Mitchell has. Wow. And has all of her kids.
3 boys. So that's insane.
Yeah.
And so what do you do in those? Do you just kind of share your experience? Do you have kind of like a speech prepared for them?
Yeah, I have a lot of different presentations, some that are faith-based and others that are more toward what happens on the other side of medicine for doctors to understand the impact, how they, when they work with families, what happens when they leave you. And do a lot in the funeral director community, to talk about the impact funeral directors have on families that are dealing with struggle. But in that case, I did one about how to find and keep happiness. When we are in a moment of deep trouble, what do you do with that? And how do you find happiness and hang on to it? So
and obviously, like, this whole topic is extremely heavy and hard to talk about, hard to handle, you don't even want to think about it, really. It's these kind of heavy topics that really make what matters most stand out. Mm-hmm. Like when you're talking about something like this, this is a religious show, but when you're talking about something like this, it doesn't matter what religion you are. Mm-hmm. You stop bickering about, little differences, and you focus on, family mm-hmm. and, your kids and how to get through things that, are really, really hard. And I imagine that must be really rewarding to be able to do that. The scripture comes to mind from the Book of Mormon when they're talking about how the Lord can... we have these weaknesses, and if we try and live righteously and go to the Lord, He'll show us those weaknesses. But as we continue to be faithful, He'll turn those weaknesses into strengths. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like that has happened in your life in this situation?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And in sharing even that very same doctrine and philosophy with people that are not of our faith have also clung to that, and they sense the truth of that, and have now learned how to take their problems to the Lord and find strength in trying to work through them. So
awesome.
What advice would you give to people who are maybe in a situation similar to yours, maybe not as severe or maybe even more severe? What kind of advice would you give to them?
Well, I'd give advice to 2 audiences, one to the sufferer and then the other to those that love the sufferer. To the sufferer, I would say, just look heavenward and try to look for those tender mercies in your life, those points of light where Heavenly Father's intervened in your behalf. And what I know for a fact is that the more you look, the more you'll begin to see. So if that's a prayerful effort on your part, I think you'll find great peace and direction and context in your life. To those that see those friends of yours or loved ones who suffer, my strong suggestion is there are no words in the English or any dictionary to help those that struggle. But what you can do, like there's no perfect arrangement of words to say. But what you can say is that I love you and I care. And just listen with a loving heart. Part of mourning with those that mourn, which I think is a supernal doctrine, is to put yourself in their place and allow them to hurt and recognize that hurt. When they feel that from you, they'll feel loved and understood, and it'll help them a great deal. So the simplest word is, I care. And if you can say that, that makes all the difference in the world.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. Thank you. Thanks, guys, for listening. And I think if you want to know more about Mitchell's journey, I mean, you can obviously check out the website. We'll leave the link. I cried when I read it. It's just, it's unimaginable what you've been through. But thank you for coming on, and thank you for sharing, and thank you for being so vulnerable all over the world about this, because I know that's what people need so that they can overcome their own trials.
Thank you.
If you guys want to check out some of the things that Chris has been doing since this event in his life, check out his game that he made based on his family traditions, and see if you can incorporate some of his traditions into your family, and it'll just be awesome. And check out his foundation, and you just have stuff kind of all over the place. And so just dive into this guy and check out everything he's got going on, and it'll be good for you. It'll be good for you.
It'll be good for you.
I feel like that's like everything like you're about. It's just like, I just want to make your life a little better.
I hope so.
Seems to be what you're all about, and that's, I don't care what religion you are. That's a good goal to have.
Thanks, guys, for watching. Please leave comments if you have any questions. Maybe we'll communicate those to you, and then you can subscribe to our channel, please, and share our videos, and have a wonderful day.